Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Check-In, Clockwork's monthly customer webinar, where we talk about executive search and how to run a better search process using Clockwork. My name is Thaddeus Andres. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Clockwork, and today I'm joined by Dan Shirley on our customer success team. Each webinar, we take a look at an individual stage of the 8 stages of executive search, and we cover kind of the theory and the how-to within the platform. Today, we're looking at the strategy view within Clockwork. Last time we looked at positions view, which included job descriptions, research criteria, Clockwork's AI generative tool. And this time we're looking at the strategy view page along with target lists and building your strategy out with a client. So that being said, thanks for joining us. And Dan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Shirley. I am the Customer Success Manager here at Clockwork. And in today's check-in webinar, we are going to be visiting the strategy view within Clockwork and how to take your sourcing strategy and implement it into your Clockwork account. Awesome. So first off, where do you access the strategy view in Clockwork? The strategy view lives within a project in Clockwork. So when you pop into a project, you'll be given this navigation bar here, where underneath the position tab, you'll find the strategy view here. And again, the strategy view is where we would define our sourcing strategy and set the parameters for how we're going to find our candidates. Awesome. So let's open up a poll to the group before we get started. Have you ever used the strategy view before? We would love to hear that. Feel free and give us an answer in the poll for the webinar. To set the stage, let's quickly talk about the 8 stages of executive search. This is the methodology in which the Clockwork platform was built on. We're currently talking about the 3rd stage within the 8 stages, which covers strategy. So the last check-in webinar that we went over covered the first part of the 3rd stage, which is defining your ideal candidate for a search and defining a job spec and research criteria in the position view of a project. So when you open up a project in Clockwork, the defining the ideal candidate piece is kind of that first piece that you would attack once you open up a new project. That second piece and that second half of this 3rd stage in the 8 stages is going into the strategy tab to then define your sourcing strategy. So before we hop into a little demo, let's quickly talk about why would you put this sourcing strategy inside of Clockwork? What are the benefits for you and your firm to use the strategy view and define your sourcing strategy inside of Clockwork? First, it helps create alignment on your sourcing strategy. So designing a sound search strategy at the beginning of a search will give your team clear instructions on what sort of industries and companies you should be investigating for sourcing. And it's in the strategy tab where you're allowed to set those parameters for your sourcing strategy and more specifically defining where you'll be looking for candidates. And by defining those parameters, we can hold all parties accountable on strategy and also execution on the strategy, right? As a result of establishing those parameters, your research team is able to hit the ground running, making research more efficient. So as a byproduct of putting this information and defining this information in the strategy tab, your research team is set up for success moving forward. They have a place to go and reference throughout the search. The third point, and arguably the most important point here, is to gain confidence and buy-in from your clients and your prospects when you're able to define your strategy clearly and have it organized inside of Clockwork. And I want to stress here, we're talking about clients and prospects as well. There's a couple different use cases that our firms are using to demonstrate how they're going to execute on a sourcing strategy. One would be when you're kicking off a project and you're demonstrating your sourcing strategy, the progress on it, as well as for prospective clients when you're pitching your services to a prospective client, having that sourcing strategy written out and defined along with some target lists inside Clockwork shows you that you guys are, as a firm, turnkey and ready to hit the go button on a project. And then lastly, setting the sourcing strategy inside of the strategy tab helps set that roadmap for the rest of your search, right? The research team, the client, the different stakeholders involved in the search can always come back and move along with the sourcing strategy and kind of use that page or this view as that North Star or a guide through the search as it progresses. Great. So let's hop into a demo and take a look at how this interacts inside of your Clockwork account. So here, when I open up a project to tie the loop from the last webinar, when you open up a project, you're first going to define your ideal candidate, which would be in the position view here, right? We've got a job description, we have job requirements, research criteria already loaded in. Great. Now the next step here is to fill out the strategy tab and start to define what sourcing strategy looks like for this project. So there's two main parts of the strategy tab. The first is this text box here. This text box is where you can cement the details of the general strategy for the project. It can be where you talk about the general sourcing strategy, right? Where are you looking for people? What do those people look like? Are there any particular areas of focus that we're going to be looking into, whether it's specific industries or sectors, as well as locations? All of this stuff can be kind of written out and put on paper here inside of this text box. Another example we've seen this text box be used is by understanding or collaborating on what the working relationship is with the client, right? What do the status calls look like? Who will be attending? Who's expected to attend? What are we expecting from the client in terms of feedback on resumes or on the long list, right? This type of stuff can be put inside of this general project strategy tab, which is a kind of a great place to broadcast out how the search is going to go internally as well with the client. Underneath this information is our target lists. Now, target lists are essentially where we are going to define the companies that we're going to source from, right? And currently, we're seeing companies or firms build their own target lists externally, right, into some sort of Google Sheets where they're defining, maybe 10 or 100, however many companies on a sheet, and they're just kind of checking them off one by one. We're also starting to see firms migrate that stuff into their Clockwork account rather than having things piecemeal where you have a target list, out in Google. You can bring that directly in here, and that's going to give you some added value, some power. Not only, like I mentioned, within alignment and getting on the same page with your team, with the client, but also within research, right? This is going to make research easier and more efficient, especially as it pertains to your people database in Clockwork. So let's take a look at how that works. So first, I'll start by adding a target list here, there's a couple different ways to add a target list. One is by import. Like we mentioned, you might have a Google sheet that's living outside of the platform. You can bring that directly inside by just dragging and dropping that directly in here, where you'll then just see your companies in a list in the target list section here. The other option is to create a list via tags, right? And what are tags? So tags are uh, basically groupings that you can create to tag onto companies in your company database, right? So again, examples for tags might be a certain sector or industry that you are focused on, right? Or it could be also any sort of discipline or common denominator, really, that you want to create a tag for and place on company records so that you now have these groups that you can just pull and put into a target list or filter in the company database. There's different uses for tags, but in this context, it would be to say, hey, we want to pull all of the companies that have a technology tag or a SaaS tag on their company record. So that way we can just say, okay, here's our target list for software companies, right? Or here's our target list for any sort of industry, right? So let's dig into it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, I've already created, as an example, a technology tag, right? And when I choose the tag that I have used on my company database, you can see that the companies that I had already tagged using the technology tag here are going to come up. I can almost audit this list before I import it into my target list, right? I can come in here, I can maybe get rid of any companies if they don't apply, right? Once that looks good, I'm going to just name this list. Let's call it technology target list. I will click save. And now you will see I have a list of target companies, right, that I have labeled as technology, for example. Now, there's a couple things to point out in this table here that are quite useful, right? So now that we have these target companies listed out, and we want to start conducting sourcing within these companies, the first thing that you would do is that you would essentially search for people in these companies that you've now identified, right? So as a researcher or someone who's responsible for sourcing, I can come in here and I can say, okay, I've got this target list. I want to search my people database for all people that currently or used to work at these companies that we've listed here, right? So I can hit search all lists. When I do that, Clockwork is going to guide me to the people database here, and it's going to automatically filter out the companies that I have already identified in the target list here, right? So with one click of a button, I'm able to go over to the people database, filter out all of those companies, and now I have a list, in this case, of 138 people that currently work or have worked at these companies, right? Now, from here, I could just take all of these people and I could send them into that project that I currently have going, right? Or I can also use some additional filtering to narrow down my list in case I was interested. So such as, you know, I want to see only current people that work at these companies, right? I could use a filter to do that. Or I want to see people who out of these 138 people that live in San Francisco, right? And use the location filter here to kind of whittle down my list, right? So let's take an example of what that would look like here. I want to use my advanced filters here on the right side of the screen. I now have popped out the advanced filters. I can go ahead and use any of these filters, these additional filters here, to kind of whittle down my list. So one example would be taking a look at candidates from past, these candidates who might have been on past searches, to then filter and see, I want to see anyone that maybe has made it to an interviewing status on a past search, and see, that kind of cream of the crop per se of people that have made it further along in past searches that work for these companies. That's a good group of people that I want to start with dumping into this project, right? So here I would use the candidate status filter. I could say, let's use interviewing, right? And I want to see anyone that's made it to interviewing stage or even further than that. I would click apply. And now I've got I've got 49 people here, more of a cream of the crop per se type list that I now want to send into the project, right? So here I can just select all those people. I can then go back to this project that we have opened up, and I can click apply, and that's going to send those 49 candidates to the project, right? And let's take a look at this target list, where we have now put people into the project, and now we want to start seeing some data in the project, right? So this is where we start to move past the Google Sheet that is living outside of the platform. We're able to combine our people database with this target list and give you a good idea of what the breakout looks like by target companies. So for example, after importing those people into the project, I can now see that 2 of those people work at Bank of America. Another 2 have worked at Bank of America in the past, right? Now, from here, if I'm a researcher or I'm responsible for sourcing and making sure that we're getting good coverage on these target companies, I could then maybe go and start checking companies off to indicate, hey, we've got enough coverage on this company. That's something we might want to check off company by company to show coverage, almost like a coverage report for sourcing, right? So you can see that there's a coverage column here, and I would just check that off. And you can see now I've gone from 0% covered to 2% covered, indicating, our progress over time and how we're doing in sourcing throughout this target list, right? And from here, thinking about this in the context of working with a client, now the client can be invited onto the project itself and take a look at how you're progressing over time with respect to the sourcing, right? And retain search firms using Clockwork are being paid up front for their services and need to proactively demonstrate value, right? And this is a great way to do it. You should never be on your heels being asked questions like, have you looked into company X or company Y, or where are you at with researching company A, right? All of this stuff, these answers are displayed here in this target list, right? So whether you get those questions over an email, or the client comes and takes a look at these reports, you're ready, right? And it is the client collaboration tools and the ability to share this information with your client that enables you to keep your client engaged and for you to gather their critical input on the sourcing strategy, right? It really promotes that collaboration as we start to surface this data, the company list, etc. If the client is on Clockwork, if they're coming in and taking a look at this stuff, they also do have the ability to leave their own comments, right? So if I'm a client, I can come in here and I can say, you know, we're not interested in sourcing into airsoft, for example, right? And now we have a chain specifically about this company. That kind of gets the conversation going, makes it more interactive over time, right? So all of this stuff to say that the target lists here are really going to promote that client collaboration earlier on in the process so that you can really align quicker and get that initial groundwork going to move the search and the progress of the search much quicker, right? And that can be done through this strategy tab here. So visiting back and coming back into the slides here to tie things together. What does the strategy view? Where does it pertain to the 8 stages? There's about 3 stages that I would say it's hitting hard on. One is within win work. The second stage, we have firms that are using Clockwork and using the strategy tab to pitch their services. The third stage, which would be strategy, which is the overall kind of umbrella that we've been operating under today and the last webinar, by using the strategy tab and the position tab to set clear strategy and align teams on who we're looking for and how we're going to find those people. And then lastly, which would be the next webinar that we're going to cover, would be stage 4, would be research, and using the strategy tab and target list specifically to kind of give you a jump start into research and get you and your research team moving quicker, right? So I want to thank everyone for checking in with me today. If you have any questions regarding the strategy view, feel free and contact me at my email, dan@clockworkrecruiting.com. More than happy to hop on a call with you and take a look at your specific instance and understand what you're trying to achieve within the strategy tab. So thank you.